We are right on time, and I can see that attendance is quickly going up. We might just want to get started. Good morning or good afternoon, dear friends and colleagues. My name is Flaubert Ndiekop. I am a senior program specialist at Canada's International Development Research Center. I'm based in Dakar, Senegal, where we have our office for West and Central Africa. I have the privilege of being the moderator of this of today's webinar, which is jointly organized by the African Energy Commission of the African Union and IDRC. This is the first
le CRDI. Donc, c'est un webinaire et qui a été appelé étant donné la demande. Ce que nous allons faire, c'est que nous allons essayer d'avoir une discussion approfondie sur le secteur énergétique à travers le continent africain. Notamment, nous allons souligner l'importance de la prise de décision basée sur les preuves et en vue de prendre des politiques et également pour mener des activités commerciales. Je ne vais pas prendre beaucoup de temps pour expliquer pourquoi nous pensons que c'est une très bonne activité importante qui va précéder le sommet de Tanzanie, mais également cela est dû à la transformation économique connue par l'Afrique et nous pensons que sans énergie, cette transformation va être mise en péril. Et je voudrais m'assurer que nous voulons nous assurer que le secteur de l'énergie joue son rôle non seulement pour soutenir la transformation économique, mais également en tant que moteur de l'inclusion. Donc,
data is very important. For today's webinar, we have the privilege of having with us the executive director of the African Energy Commission, Mr. Rashid Ali Abdallah, who is going to say a few words of welcome, following which we'll welcome Erin Tansey, who is the director of the Sustainable Inclusive Economy Division at Canada's International Development Research Center, based in Ottawa. Without further ado, let me bring in Mr. Rashid for his welcoming remarks. Mr. Rashid, would you mind opening your mic and your camera? There you go. The floor is yours, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Mrs. Erin Tansey, Director, Sustainable Inclusive Economy, International Development Research Centers. Esteemed colleagues, brothers, sisters, and friends from Ministry of Energy and National Energy Statistics Office of African Union Member State, National Focal Points, African National Focal Points, and coordinator from AUC Member States, representative of development partner, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. On behalf of African Energy Commission, AFREC, and on my own behalf, I would like to welcome you to this very important webinar on energy and gender data in Africa. As you are aware, and this since the beginning of 2024, the African Energy Commission organizing every month at least one webinar to discuss and exchange and find a suitable solution for a problem encountered by the African Union member state, and also share good practice on energy statistic and energy information system across the continent. We are very happy to organize this webinar jointly by the African Energy Commission and the International Development Research Centers, IDRC. Ladies and gentlemen, In the recent years, AFREC has launched several projects and initiatives with the aim of revitalizing the production of the energy statistic in Africa, such as providing support to the African member state to establish or improving of national or regional energy information system, organizing continuous capacity building workshops for African national focal point, among other interventions. Additionally, AFREC has just completed 2025-2030 strategy for improving and harmonizing energy statistics in Africa. This strategy has an action plan to highlight the activity and action to be carried out in the coming years in the field of the energy statistic and energy information system. Of course, despite the importance of genders in the planning, monitoring, and evaluation of the energy policies and program at the national, regional, and continental level, there are very indicators on the gender in the energy information system at the national, and regional, and continental level. This situation due to the fact that the gender aspect is not often taken into the account in the collection of the energy data. The lack of the gender aspect make it very difficult to conduct a proper data analysis in certain area of the energy, such as access to the electricity, access to clean cooking, access to the finance in the field of the energy. It should also be noted that the gender aspect is not considered in SDG 7 of the Agenda 2030, UN Agenda 2030. In order to set up an effective policy for improving access to electricity, access to the clean cooking, and also have equitable access without any discrimination to financing in the field of energy, it then become very imperative for Africa that all key indicators in the field of the energy sector are disaggregated according to the genders. I'm very happy to have this webinar with very clear objective. First, take stock as the mainstreaming of the genders and inclusion consideration into the national energy strategy in selected African country, and as well as in the business strategy. Second, identify data and knowledge gap on the energy and gender in Africa. Third, reflect on potential consequence of gender and inclusion data lack for an inclusive and demonstrative energy transition in Africa. Fourth, make actionable recommendation to relevant stakeholders for correction, including national and regional policy bodies, development partners, civil society organizations, and the private sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, during this webinar, we will have a presentation of AFREC, the experience of the African member state on the field of the gender in the energy data, such as Morocco, South Africa, Ghana, and Kenya. In addition to this, we will have a presentation of IntelliCap Advisory Service and an analysis by Prof. Bebeshua Rausha. I hope that I pronounced this name correctly. Canada Research Chair in the Global Women Issue and member of the College of the Royal Society of Canada, the University of Western Ontario. Let me end by welcoming the partnership between the African Energy Commission, AFREC, and the International Development Research Center, which led to the organization of this very important event. We hope that this partnership can continue for development of the energy sector in Africa, in particular, the improvement and harmonization of the energy statistic and energy information system in Africa. Before I conclude again, I would like to invite all partners and relevant stakeholders in energy sector who interested in energy sector development in Africa to join us in our effort to improve and enhance the energy access in the continent through the separate program that AFREC is conducting. By this, I would like to end here. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rashid. That was very appreciated. Without further ado, I would like to hand over the mic to Erin Tanse, who is the director of the Sustainable Inclusive Economy Division at IDRC. Erin, are you ready to take the floor, please?
Yes. Can you see me?
Yes. Over to you.
Okay. Thanks so much, Flaubert, and thanks for the introduction. I am speaking to you today from Ottawa, where it is, I think, almost minus 30 degrees with the wind chill. So for those of you in warmer temperatures, just enjoy it. Also, I just wanted to take a minute to thank Mr. Abdullah for your opening remarks. I think that really sets the tone for today's activity. And I know there's a lot to get through, so I'm going to be quick. But I just wanted to say that I'm really delighted that IDRC and the African Energy Commission have been able to collaborate today on this webinar. It's because it's refreshing when we're joining hands to foster constructive discussions on ways to optimize and look at the options for Africa's energy sector so that it can really play its catalytic role in fueling Africa's socioeconomic transformation and making sure that no one is left behind. And for me in particular, as the director of a team that's called the Sustainable Inclusive Economies Division, and also I'm the chair of our Gender Equality and Inclusion Programming team at IDRC, to me, so often and equity issues are sort of decoupled from sectoral issues, as if, we need to take care of development challenges first, and then we'll see how somehow we can balance things out, sort of later down the road. But when we talk about gender equality, it's just simply about, finding a place where women and men can actively and meaningfully participate in the development of their lives, of their communities and their societies, free of discrimination on the basis of being either female or male. But it's fortunate that there is a growing body of evidence that showing that really that mainstreaming this gender equality and inclusion is actually smart economics, as economies can grow faster and in a more balanced manner with fewer risks of socioeconomic disruptions. So to keep the momentum going, there's really, as I think was already highlighted, a need for quality data that's going to help us to understand as accurate sectoral data with a gender lens. So this data is really essential to assess progress against our development goals. And of course, with that data, then people can course correct, further plan, etc. So the webinar, as you know, comes just after the Africa Energy Summit that took place in Tanzania, that ended a couple of days ago. And it illustrates that AFREC and IDRC's resolve to ensure that quality data and evidence inform and drive policy and business action, energizing Africa's future. In my team, we have a big cohort of research, because that's what IDRC does. We fund research. It's over $18 million investment in clean energy research. Not all of it is in Africa, but a lot of it is. And we're hoping that the evidence that is coming out of those research projects will really contribute to the data gap that we're looking to fill. We at IDRC, we are part of Canada's foreign affairs and development efforts, and really we're here to invest in research, share knowledge with researchers and policymakers for greater uptake and use. And we really try to mobilize global alliances like this one here, so that we can build a more sustainable and inclusive world. So the joint webinar with the African Energy Commission is therefore really well in line with our mandates. And I look forward to an insightful webinar on the state of energy and gender data on the continent and potential ways forward. Thanks. Back to you, Flaubert.
Thank you so much, Erin, for those very inspiring words. Like the executive director of AFREC put it, today we'll be fortunate to hear about the experiences of various parts of Africa, North Africa, East Africa, South Africa, West Africa, as well as some experts who specialize in, bringing a business lens to whatever is happening in the energy sector, as well as an academic expert. In this case, we are talking of Professor Bipasha. But before that, it will be important to let AFREC set the stage by telling us why is it important to consider gender statistics as we try to boost the energy sector in Africa. And for that, we are going to give the floor to Samson. Samson, who is the head of the Energy Information System and Statistics Division at AFREC. Samson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Robert. So I think after this very good two opening remark from Deputy Director of AFREC and then RDC, allow me now to make a presentation on the importance. I will bring a brief introduction, the traditional role and the impact of limited access to energy, the inequity in access to energy, a gender issue, the impact of access to modern energy on women, the opportunity, integrating a gender-specific energy, a case study, and then some conclusion. As an introduction, as you know very well, the relationship with gender in Africa is key, is very important topic, because you can see the access to renewable energy and then clean cooking is not evidence to everyone, because women in particular are the main user and manager of energy resources in households, but they are affected by many challenges. So as you can see, in Africa, traditional society strongly influence how women are interacting with energy. We have especially with domestic work, we have physical and health competency, and then we have a loss of time. So those are the traditional role of women in Africa. Now, when we go to inequity, women don't have they don't have equal access to modern energy in Africa. We due to the structural inequality, we have energy poverty. Also, women they have a lower income than men that are less able to invest in modern energy such as solar or cooking gas. Also, we have a lack of representation in the energy policy. Women are underrepresented in energy-related decision-making process. Also, as a result, the specific needs of women are often neglected in the electrification strategy and then energy transition project. We have also the access to credit, and then also you can realize that women often they don't have a limited access to finance or credit mechanism needed to modern energy. So those are the things. Well, now, what are the impact? The impact also, as you can see, there need to improve the improvement to access to clean and affordable energy can have a transformative impact on women and gender, especially economic empowerment, workload, education, health, and safety. So you can see that access to renewable energy of women to start by income generation activity. And then also when we talk about workload reduction, Modern electrification appliances also can reduce women domestic workload, because when you have access to when you have access to those LPG stove, it's easy for women to cook. But if they still use the wood or charcoal, it's very difficult for them. And then also we are talking also about the health and safety. And then this thing also, there will be a lot of debate ongoing now on this issue of clean cooking, when unfortunately many women are losing their life due to non-access to clean cooking. Now, I think these are things that, well, unfortunately, women are suffer. Now, the gender, when we are talking about the gender response to energy policy, we need to involve women in planning and implementation of energy and policy to ensure that to identify the specific need, because we need to identify the specific need. And then also, we need to train and make sure that we train women technicians and entrepreneurs in the energy sector to boost the economic participation. And then also to target the access to technology, encourage women to friendly technologies such as clean stove, solar home, mini grid. Provide also target subsidy or credit to women enabled in particular in rural area to acquire modern equipment. Also, the community aware. We need to also to promote education on impact of modern energy solution, highlight also the energy for health, time, and productivity. We have many cases of studies, so they allow us to highlight just three. In Kenya, in Rwanda, and then in Ghana, we have a clean cooking stove in Kenya program that target women head household, promoting improved cook stove to reduce emission and then improve energy efficiency. Rwanda, we have rural women benefit from solar cooperative, where they have trained to install and maintain solar system and then increase their economic autonomy. Ghana, there is a She Better energy process that has provided women a share better farmer with access to modern energy technology and then increase their productivity and reduce their manual labor. Now, allow me now to give you some key indicator, because we are thinking that it's good now to focus on some key indicator on energy and women in Africa. We can think that this indicator in our country may start producing, so that it can help us when we monitoring the evaluation on how women are involved now on energy sector. The first indicator is number of women gain sustainable access to electricity or alternative renewable energy sources. The second indicator is number of households headed by women gains access to electricity or alternative renewable energy sources. The third one is the number of households headed by women who has benefit from subsidy or credit for connectivity to electricity grid or for access to renewable energy. The fourth one is average of amount paid by women head of households for access to different energy services. The fifth one is the proportion of households headed by women who has access to service in pay by the women. So we have also some additional indicator that we think that is very important, is that the number of women participating in decision making on energy services, the rate of feminization of staff women in energy company at the different level and the responsibility, the share of a public expenditure allocated directly to association or group of women working in energy sector, or to group specifically targeting women on those issues. The number of women who has participated in sectoral policy development process. So those are the indicators that we think now we need the country, our AU member state need to start publishing data, so that it can be easy for AFREC at a continental level now to see how far women are now in decision making of energy, and then also how women has now access to electricity, because there is a serious issue about access to electricity in Africa. Now, how is the progress? Is it women has less access to electricity than men, or men has less access to electricity than women? And then also the last one that we list is the issue about clean cooking. It's very unfortunate that women can lose their life while they are cooking for the households. I think indeed it's very pity. So it's good to have those figures to show to our decision makers that, look, women are cooking for the household, but unfortunately, at the end of the day, they expose themselves to health issue, which is very pity indeed. Now, in conclusion, what we can say that access to electricity Africa is not gender neutral, but normally should be gender neutral. Either you are woman or woman, you should have a quality access to electricity, to energy, to energy or electricity or any form of energy. But we realize that access to energy is not gender neutral, meaning that either I'm a man or woman, I don't have a quality chance to have access to electricity. Now, to reduce this gender equality is essential to adopt inclusive energy policy that will take into account the specific needs of women and strengthen their role in the energy transition. Because now we are talking a lot about energy transition. We need to put the gender aspect on at the center of energy transition so that all, either men or women, we all should participate on energy transition. Now, modern and sustainable energy is not only for labor to improve women quality, but it's also the key factor to achieve in achieving gender inequality and boosting the overall economic development. So I think that comes to my end of my presentation. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Samson, for this presentation. I can see that you kept time, which is great. Key takeaway from your presentation is that AFREC is not interested in mainstreaming gender into energy statistics simply for the sake of it. You see an economic interest in it, you see an environmental interest in it, and you see an equity aspect as well. And we can see that you have already talked about a set of indicators that African countries should start collecting so that AFREC can work better with policymakers at the continental level to move things forward, to push further with inclusion as much as we are also promoting energy for all, including, of course, clean energy. And we are very lucky that today we'll be hearing from representatives from various parts of Africa to get a sense of what exactly they are doing at their level, how far are they, what are some of the challenges that they are seeing, what are some of the opportunities that they are seeing, and how, building on what they are already doing, we can go further. So our next speaker will be from Morocco, and her name is Miss Shabini Hanna from the Ministry of, I'm not sure I got it right, but basically she's from the government of Morocco, and she's going to share with us the Moroccan perspective on the issue at hand. Just for the participants to know that we have English and French translation. I think Ms. Shabini Hanna will be speaking in French. So you can turn to the translation if you're not comfortable in French. We are giving you time to do that. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you have that option. Mrs. Shabini, are you available to take the floor now and share the Moroccan experience with us? What is happening there? What are you learning?
Bonjour tout le monde. Chers experts de l'Union africaine, de la Commission africaine de l'énergie, chers participants et participantes des pays invités à ce webinaire, chers collègues, permettez-moi de vous présenter quelques éléments de l'intégration de la dimension genre dans les statistiques sur les énergies renouvelables. Comme vous connaissez, cette thématique revêt d'une grande importance dans les politiques publiques, dans les stratégies énergétiques et également d'autres stratégies comme les stratégies minières, en vue de garantir une transition énergétique au service du développement durable. Donc, mon intervention va aborder quelques éléments clés. Je vais rappeler tout d'abord le contexte général. en lien avec cette thématique importante. Aussi, je vais donner un aperçu sur la stratégie énergétique nationale, sur le rôle des énergies renouvelables dans la transition énergétique et dans la réduction de ces inégalités genre au niveau social. Et aussi, je vais partager avec vous quelques éléments d'intégration de la dimension genre, quelques indicateurs genre, et je vais conclure par les principaux défis et perspectives. Ce sont des réflexions que j'aimerais bien les partager avec vous. Donc, comme vous connaissez, l'intégration du genre dans les statistiques de la transition énergétique, qui s'inscrit dans un contexte mondial qui est marqué par plusieurs engagements croissants en faveur de l'égalité sexe et aussi du développement durable. Je cite par exemple les objectifs de développement durable post-2015, en particulier l'objectif 7 relatif à l'accès à l'énergie propre, l'ODD aussi 5, et les différentes interdépendances de ces objectifs avec les autres objectifs de développement durable en termes dans les différents domaines de la société, l'éducation, la santé, etc. Et aussi, il y a les accords climatiques, notamment en faveur de la Convention cadre des Nations Unies pour le changement climatique, les conférences de parties. Et donc, nous sommes censés d'honorer nos engagements vis-à-vis de ces accords climatiques et également, je cite les conventions mondiales envers de l'égalité genre pour améliorer davantage l'accès équitable à des sources énergétiques. Donc, pour le contexte de notre pays, donc, en vue de réduire la dépendance énergétique en termes d'approvisionnement d'énergie et aussi pour honorer ses engagements vis-à-vis des différents engagements climatiques à l'échelle internationale. Donc, notre pays s'est inscrit dans une stratégie énergétique ambitieuse initiée depuis 2009 selon un modèle énergétique national qui se base sur le développement des énergies renouvelables et la promotion de l'efficacité énergétique. Et cette stratégie a été traduite en une feuille de route comprenant des programmes d'action à court, moyen et long terme. Et ces différentes stratégies et programmes, donc pour le volet énergie renouvelable, donc on a des objectifs stratégiques de porter la part des énergies renouvelables dans la puissance électrique installée à 52% à l'horizon 2030, et également d'autres objectifs stratégiques liés à l'efficacité énergétique, par exemple. Donc, l'activation de l'ensemble de ces programmes d'énergie renouvelable, il contribue à améliorer la situation énergétique par rapport à la première année de lancement de la stratégie, notamment en matière de contribution plus accrue des énergies renouvelables dans le mix énergétique et particulièrement le mix électrique. Aussi l'amélioration du système électrique, la réduction de la dépendance énergétique qui permet de plus en plus un mix énergétique diversifié, ce qui a un impact social sur la société et qui permet plus d'accès à l'énergie. Pour les éléments d'intégration de la dimension genre au Maroc, donc nous avons quelques dates clés qui ont marqué ces efforts d'intégration de la dimension genre, notamment la Constitution du Maroc 2011 qui intègre les considérations genre dans la planification et l'exécution budgétaire sensible au genre. Également en 2013, en termes de gouvernance, la mise en place d'un centre d'excellence de la budgétisation sensible au genre qui vise bien sûr en collaboration avec les différents départements ministériels d'intégrer des programmes qui prennent en considération l'aspect genre et également les différentes réformes institutionnelles législatives pour instaurer davantage les principes de la budgétisation sensible au genre dans les différents programmes de développement économique et aussi la programmation budgétaire dans le cadre de la loi de finances. On a aussi en 2019 eu plus d'intégration sectorielle tenant compte de cet aspect dans les différents programmes, notamment pour notre département, donc les programmes qui sont liés à l'énergie, la géologie et les mines, qui sont les domaines d'action de compétences du ministère. Nous avons également le nouveau modèle de développement qui stipule plus d'intégration de cette dimension dans les différents programmes socio-économiques et également l'intégration et la participation accrue des différents départements ministériels pour être un préfigurateur par rapport à la sensibilité genre dans la planification stratégique. Et ceci, il est appuyé par le circulaire chef de gouvernement en date de juillet 2017. Nous avons aussi un plan gouvernemental selon ces deux phases d'exécution, donc ICRAM 1 et ICRAM 2, qui est porté par le ministère de la solidarité, du développement social, l'égalité et la famille au Maroc. Pour les indicateurs genre, en liaison avec la mise en œuvre des programmes des énergies renouvelables, nous avons en vue d'accélérer la transition énergétique. Donc, le secteur énergétique en tant que secteur promoteur dans l'économie nationale est en pleine mutation. Donc, plusieurs réformes ont été instaurées en vue de suivre les mutations de ce secteur. Je cite par exemple les réformes qui sont liées au secteur électrique, l'ouverture du réseau moyenne tension, l'autoproduction, la loi sur l'autoproduction et aussi la loi de principe d'application de la préférence nationale par les développeurs privés et tous les contrats de réalisation de fournitures et de services. Et tous ces programmes, ils ont un impact, toutes ces réformes, ils ont un impact ou bien des retombées socio-économiques en termes d'inclusion sociale de la population, l'intégration industrielle, le développement des activités commerciales génératrices de revenus, la création d'emplois directs et indirects, les formations aussi au niveau local au profit des hommes et des femmes en égalité et aussi la mise en œuvre de la stratégie de développement local portée par l'Agence marocaine de l'énergie durable, Mazen, au Maroc, donc, qui est une agence qui porte surtout les projets de développement durable. Et cette stratégie, il vise à réduire le désenclavement des territoires en termes d'alimentation des communes en eau potable et toutes les infrastructures de base, les routes, etc., lampadaires solaires dans les écoles, et aussi l'appui à des activités dans le domaine de la santé et de l'éducation et plus de promotion de l'emploi local et le développement aussi de l'agriculture au niveau local et toutes les activités génératrices de revenus. Je cite également le programme d'électrification rurale globale, le PERG, porté par l'Office national de l'électricité et de l'eau potable au Maroc, qui est sous tutelle du ministère de la Transition énergétique et de développement durable. Et ce programme d'électrification a permis d'améliorer le taux d'électrification dans le milieu rural, ce qui a eu un impact positif et plusieurs retombées socio-économiques ont été recensées en termes d'émergence de nouvelles activités économiques génératrices de revenus, développement aussi de la petite industrie et de l'agriculture, l'augmentation de la taux de scolarisation des enfants, notamment les filles, ralentissement aussi de l'exode rural et également il a permis aux différents foyers et villages électrifiés de s'équiper de plus en plus des appareils électriques, des électroménagers, etc., ce qui a permis d'améliorer le confort et de vie et les conditions de vie au niveau des foyers dans le milieu rural. Et également l'amélioration d'autres conditions d'hygiène, de santé, etc. Et de sécurité aussi au niveau des villages électrifiés. En termes de défis et de perspectives par rapport à cette thématique importante, donc pour le volet système d'information énergétique, donc nous avons des données qu'on collecte auprès des opérateurs du secteur de l'énergie pour le volet énergie renouvelable, bien sûr, mais pour les données qui concernent la biomasse, donc on fait toujours recours à des enquêtes statistiques qui sont très coûteuses et qui requièrent des budgets dédiés pour les mettre en œuvre et pour pouvoir, bien sûr, collecter des données désagrégées tenant compte aussi de l'aspect genre. Donc, c'est une difficulté, c'est par rapport à la collecte et la réalisation de ces études va permettre, bien sûr, d'alimenter davantage le système d'information énergétique. Il y a aussi le manque de sensibilisation à l'importance de l'intégration au genre. Parfois, bien sûr, on peut dire les unités statistiques qui sont enquêtées lors de ces études, parfois ils sont moins sensibilisés par rapport à l'importance de cette thématique. Nous avons aussi le manque d'outils et de cadres méthodologiques normalisés qui va permettre d'évaluer, de suivre l'impact différencié en tenant compte de cette dimension genre, et aussi manque d'études plus approfondies comme les études longitudinales qui permet d'alimenter le système de données plus détaillées, surtout pour les activités informelles, la collecte de bois par exemple. En termes de perspective, donc, il faut renforcer davantage les capacités humaines pour mieux intégrer le genre dans les statistiques énergétiques. Améliorer aussi la collecte des données en intégrant cet aspect dans les statistiques énergétiques. Avoir des plans d'échantillonnage, par exemple, ou bien des plans d'enquête, de recensement aussi, qui tient en considération cet aspect genre et qui assure cette représentativité pour pouvoir exploiter ces informations et alimenter les indicateurs genre. Conduire des études d'impact socio-économique qui relatent cette thématique et avec un focus bien sûr sur le secteur de l'énergie ou bien les autres, on peut dire, les autres domaines comme la santé, l'éducation, etc., avec les différentes interdépendances de ce secteur de l'énergie dans les différents autres domaines. Avoir aussi un compte satellite emploi-énergie, ça va nous permettre d'évaluer et d'avoir des données plus fiables et précises sur l'emploi créé dans le secteur de l'énergie. Et la consolidation aussi de la coopération et la communication entre les différents départements, les différents secteurs, va permettre, bien sûr, sans cesse d'enrichir les informations statistiques concernant cette thématique tenant compte de l'aspect, bien sûr, genre, c'est-à-dire évaluer les impacts en termes d'accès à l'énergie et aussi en termes d'impact macroéconomique et socio-économique dans les différents domaines, santé, éducation, infrastructure, etc. Et je vous remercie pour votre attention.
C'est nous qui vous remercions pour un exposé à la fois clair et je dirais exhaustif, où vous êtes parti non seulement des initiatives et du cadre, je dirais, réglementaire, jusqu'au programme et intervention, réalisation, avec l'impact observé, que ce soit en termes d'accès ou en termes de développement économique ou d'amélioration de la situation des groupes ciblés. Et puis, les enseignements que vous tirez avec des recommandations fort intéressantes qui, je ne doute pas un seul instant, contribueront à alimenter, n'est-ce pas, la réflexion. We have the privilege to have Madame Elizabeth Marwabwa, who is from the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, who is going to present on the South African case, drawing on a work that they've just completed to understand not only the situation of gender mainstreaming and diversity in a particular sector.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. South Africa welcomes the opportunity and appreciates the initiative of AFREC to look into the issues related to gender diversity in the energy space. South Africa strongly believes in gender transformation and equality. This is enshrined in our constitution. Within the energy space, we also have a policy and a strategy that enshrines the role of women and inclusion within the energy space. I see that the Africa was focusing on energy access. In South Africa, in terms of energy access, we are at 92%. And being at 92%, issues of energy access are not as critical, but clean cooking is also considered critical of that, because although people are connected to electricity, most of them cannot afford to use electricity for space heating and cooking. Therefore, we are looking at other more efficient and cost-effective technologies to use, especially for cooking and especially for women in the rural areas. I just wanted to respond to that. But this particular presentation is going to look at how women can be included in the renewable energy space. And what the department has done is to conduct a baseline study on wind and solar utility scale to see how women are involved, what are the issues, what are the challenges, and how can we then deal with those. Please move the slide. This study was conducted with the assistance of the SAWIA and SAPVIA, which are our associations responsible for wind and solar PV respectively, and supported financially partly by GIZ. The purpose of the study really was to assess the growth of the South African utility scale and wind and solar energy markets, and understand the gender representation and what can be done in order for us to increase the participation of women in the solar PV and wind in South Africa. We realize these are emerging industries, unlike the petroleum sector, and we want to ensure that we entrench women in them. So we really, when we looked at it, we just looked at how to understand the gender representation, identify influencing factors, and also identify a set of recommendations to make sure that we make the sector right before it proceeds. Next. Then, I think we can pass that slide. It just tells us what we did in terms of the research. In terms of the status quo, as we speak, women share about 32% in the oil and gas, renewable and wind sector globally, and they are 21% share in the power sector. So you can see that women participation globally is not at par, it's extremely low. And in South Africa, the figures are almost similar. Next. In the South African context, we do have challenges similar to the global statistics. 33% of the energy sector representation is from women, and that number has actually been decreased. But we have looked at ways now to make sure that we encourage women participation in the sector. This 33% we are saying is low in the sense that in South Africa, women are more than 50% in terms of population representation. So it is an anomaly that given the high percentage of representation of women in the population, when you look at the employment sector, formal sector, women are underrepresented. And so we are happy that we have identified this, and we should be able to come up with resolutions to look at it. Next. In terms of the survey, we have noted that we have 33%, as I've already indicated, female representation with 67% as male. Next. The gender breakdown of the workforce in the electricity, gas, steam and air conditioning sectors in South Africa. We look at 2021, again, you will see that the representation is very low. For temporary employees, we are slightly higher, closer to 50%. Unskilled, we are at 27%, semi-skilled 30, skilled 35, professional 36, senior management 34, and top management 26. So we will be focusing on how to increase our women at top management, how to also increase our women at senior management and professional management, so that we do have meaningful participation in the sector. We also checked the representation at the board level within the sector. We noted that about 19% of women are in the boards for different companies, which is still also low compared to the 80% male. Next. Then in terms of identifying where these challenges are, we looked at the enrollment and graduation of all degrees and diplomas in the academic institutions in South Africa. We noted that in terms of enrollment, we have more women enrolled for degrees, but in terms of graduation, we have less women graduating and coming out of the system. Then in terms of participation as well, we have less women that are doing STEM subjects and fewer women that are having related qualifications in STEM, which is a mirror reflection of what we see in the sector where we are at professional top management and senior management. We have less representation and skills because it is coming from the fact that enrollment at universities, less women are in the STEM subjects, which are required at the renewable energy space, especially if you have to move up the ladder. Next slide, please. Then if you zero down to engineering, you can see from the graph that there is underrepresentation of women across the years. We are in 2020, the gap is becoming slightly narrower, but it's still there. So we need to look at how we can encourage women and our young girls to also enroll for STEM subjects and also enroll for it so that they pass and enroll for engineering subjects. So this is where the problem is, that our young girls are really not into the math, science, and engineering and technology related subjects. So what are the next slide? What are the recommendations that we have to put in place to improve this gender diversity? We did an analysis of that and we came up with a number of recommendations. Next slide. In the recommendations to address this, it is important that we address the social norms. Please move to the next slide. We address the social norms that discourage women from studying STEM subjects, and these we have a number of them, including some of them which are critical. We need to have representations of women that are in various companies at senior management level that can speak to learners and promote learning in STEM science-related subjects. We need to identify and increase visibility of women role models in the wind and solar energy sector. We also need to engage the Department of Education so that they actively promote and talk about opportunities, career opportunities in the renewable energy sector. Next, please. Then we identified that there are a number of barriers to entry which needs action. And these are to one, address social norms that discourage women from studying STEM, to increase awareness of renewable energy sector as a career option of choice, 3, ensure that access to funds and resources for these young girls to also participate in the sector, and diversify the recruitment process to ensure that companies consciously act on enrolling women in their different companies. The other social norms that needs to be addressed is to include women in branding and social publicity, increase their visibility, and challenge depictions where we have the workplace as a male only. We need to challenge those depictions by actively engaging the various stakeholders and companies so that they too can be active and conscious and then promote inclusion of women. Next slide. In the next slide, we need to increase awareness of renewable energy sector as a career option for all. And this needs to be done through provision of scholarships dedicated for women to study in engineering-related subjects, career information days that are taken to schools so that we make them aware of the opportunities and the requirements. And this should be done at an early stage where students can choose maths and science and physics to study as options, which allows them to then study internship programs, gender-responsive education. Also, the syllabus in the schools needs to be revised so that some of these new areas can be included, and then improve the quality teaching for STEM so that young girls can pass even if they are coming from rural areas. So to ensure equal access to funds and resources, we need to also encourage networking, diversity training, evaluation criteria, and funding of programs. I'm not going to explain because we have provided the slides. Then in terms of diversity of the recruitment process, we need to track gender, we need to review adverts, we also need to look at salaries and benefits so that women get attracted to the sector. You can imagine you don't want to be at an IPP out in the rural areas where you cannot have access to your family. So the salaries and benefits should be beneficial and attract women to be there. Then provide training and development, and then have companies directly involved in policies that are inclusive. Next, then we need to have a diversity, barriers to progression and retention, ensure that women enter similar leadership positions, support mentorship, improve site working conditions. I think the slides have gone backwards. So we need to ensure that companies have policies that support gender diversity, amend policies to become more friendly and inclusive, and also have the norms from different companies, social norms addressed to encourage women to be retained in the sectors and establish gender diversity targets for companies. So we need to ensure that to ensure women in leadership, we need to provide coaching, networking, resource specs, systematic removal of systematic barriers, and showcasing to celebrate the success of women, because it then encourages other companies to support women in leadership. Then the next is to have support, mentorship, and networking opportunities. We have started a program in South Africa where we take women at various stages and put them through a mentorship program so that they actually are provided with experience, they are exposed, and to do that, you need financial resources. So you need to actually work together with your governments, international organization to support the networking opportunities for women. Next. The next is to amend, improve working conditions for women. I think that's very clear. Health and safety, harassment, recreation, incentives, and dialogues and families. We need to really look at the environment to make it attractive for women to participate in the utility scale renewable energy sectors. Next slide. I have already spoken about amending policies in order to support diversity. Gender mainstreaming is important. Each company needs to have specific policy of inclusion and diversity, which has got a specific bias on women. Next slide. Then in South Africa, when we also have conferences, we check and we encourage conference organizers to have female speakers, female program directors, so that it provides that opportunity and gives an example that women can do it and encourage diversity. You come to South African conferences, you will see that a lot of women are participating. Then eradicating of sexism from the workplace through training, safety, and harassment. And this kind of training should not only focus on women, but should also focus on men, so that they understand what we mean, and they also understand why it is important to ensure that we eradicate sexism at the workplace. Next. Next slide, please. I think I think this is a next slide we can have. Next slide, it is just explaining the way it was structured. From the South African point of view, there is still much to be done to transform the renewable energy sector through partnership. And the baseline study has given us the recommendations on how to improve women participation. Although we are sitting at 33%, we are not comfortable with that, and would like to ensure that we have a pipeline of young people coming in. We have a pipeline of professionals to be promoted to be in top management. We know that if your leadership is transformed, it is possible to transform the whole sector. With that, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for giving us the opportunity to present our study.
Thank you so much for sharing the South African experience. which I'm sure is very inspiring for many other countries. We can see how building from a project that allow you to do a baseline study, you are able to draw some lessons and start acting on some of the lessons from that study. Without further ado, I would like to now move to Kenya, and just to remind our guests and participants that they can use the Q&A section window, like the chat, well, Q&A at the bottom of your screen, to ask questions that will then be shared with panelists later on. On that note, let me now turn to Kenya. Stephen is the Director of Renewable Energy at the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum of Kenya. Stephen, the floor is yours to share the Kenyans' experience and perspective.
Thank you. So I'm going to share the perspective of Kenya in terms of integration of gender into clean cooking statistics in Kenya. But first of all, I want to highlight the global view of statistics. Then I'll delve into Kenyan situation. Globally, as you're aware, we have 2.3 billion people who rely on fuels like wood, charcoal, coal, and kerosene to cook their food. And you know, this is quite dangerous because the smoke inhalation exposes and kills up to 3.2 million people annually, and majorly women and children. Then also lack of access to clean cooking solutions impacts negatively on women and girls' health, education, employment, and overall well-being. Again, also we have stereotypes in our country and in Africa where we say women, their work is to go collect firewood and come and cook. So it reinforces the gender stereotypes and traps women in poverty. Again, also, you know that globally using our wood to cook leads to forest degradation, forcing women and girls again also to walk distances to carry heavy loads. And in our country where we have conflict in the northern part and women living in refugee camps, there is increased vulnerability to physical attacks when they go out of the camp to search for fuel. Again, it has a lot of impact on expectant mothers, leading to adverse birth outcomes. And these are some of the impacts that globally. For example, globally, and especially in Africa and in Kenya, we have time poverty, where up to 5 hours are spent on collecting fuel wood and cooking. And we know that 75% of this work is not paid for. Then we have poverty, whereby a third of income in Africa goes into fuel, so fuel wood. We have also drudgery. You can imagine walking 5 to 10 kilometers and carrying 20 kilograms of firewood. This is very common in many areas. Then, as I mentioned, we have vulnerability to violence, and according to what, as an example, in 2014 in Uganda, refugee camp, 41% of households reported incidences of violence during firewood collection during that time. Then, as I mentioned, there are health effects because of high exposure of harmful smoke, which goes up to 100 times the recommended by the World Health Organization. Now, I cannot speak about energy access or energy access on clean cooking and gender in Kenya. According to World Bank, 22%, of report of 2022, only 60% of people in sub-Saharan Africa have access to clean cooking fuels and technologies, and this includes Kenya. women and children in our country spend 3 to 4 hours to go and collect firewood, not even talking about cooking. So they spend 3 to 4 hours collecting firewood, and you can imagine coming back and now cooking for 1 or more hours. So this is quite devastating, and we need to do something about this. Then we have a challenge in our country on gender disaggregated data on clean cooking. According to our Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, over 80% of women in rural areas are responsible for cooking and managing household energy, and that involves collecting firewood. In terms of adoption of clean cooking technologies, 9 million people in Kenya still rely on biomass, but we are seeing some increase in adoption of clean cooking technologies in our country, particularly where we have women-led households. So the government has put some efforts to be able to address this. For example, you may know that as a country, we have an energy we have a gender policy in energy, addressing the issues of energy. Mainstreaming of gender in clean cooking. According to Kenya's National Clean Cooking Strategy, it aims at increasing clean cooking solutions from 16% in the year 2019 to 60% by 2028. So we are considering gender integration to ensure that women have access to affordable clean cooking technologies, and we want to have at least 60% of clean cooking being increased by 2028, which is 2 to 3 years to come. According to Kenya Energy Policy 2018, which we are reviewing, and the National Clean Cooking Transition Strategy, we are focusing on integrating gender in planning and in all interventions to bridge the gender gap in energy access. So these policies and strategies that have been developed are focused on integrating gender in planning and interventions to bridge the gender gaps in energy access, and especially in clean cooking. There are economic and health benefits for women when we integrate in our country, when we integrate gender in clean cooking. As I mentioned, globally, also in our country, we believe that there are health impacts. And as you're aware, adoption of clean cooking reduces indoor air pollution, which is a major cause of respiratory illnesses. We have over 21,000 women and children dying annually due to respiratory diseases from smoke and exposure in our country. Then the women can also be able to benefit economically. We believe as a country, if we adopt clean cooking technologies, we'll save around $300 annually per household on fuel and health costs. So what is the role of women in the clean cooking sector in our country? We know that women represent 45% of the clean cooking market, and so they play a key role in household energy decisions and technology adoptions according to UN Women 2020. So women are becoming entrepreneurs in our country, and they are getting involved in clean cooking, with women in rural areas becoming distributors and promoters of clean cooking stoves. And this has been contributing to local economic development. You will not find many women in the rural areas selling these devices, but majorly locally, women are doing that. Though now, for us to be able to spur the growth, we have companies that have moved to the countryside to be able to promote clean cooking. And especially in one of our projects we call Kenya Off-Grid Solar Access project, where we have a component, we are supposed to distribute around 60,000 clean cooking technologies to the communities. We have faced some challenges in our country, and we're also looking at the future recommendations. So these are some of the challenges that as a country we are facing. We lack gender disintegrated data on clean cooking adoptions, and especially in rural areas. And this hinders development of gender-specific policies and interventions. So generally, we have a gender policy in energy, but we lack the gender disaggregated data on clean cooking adoption. So we have some recommendations as a country. We want to strengthen the collection of gender disaggregated data to monitor the impact of clean cooking technologies on women's health and economic welfare. We also want to enhance accessibility and affordability of clean cooking solutions for women, particularly in rural and marginalized communities. For example, in one of the projects which we have been using, the resort-based financing, we have introduced end-user subsidy so that the women and the marginalized can be able, the vulnerable can be able to access clean cooking solutions. And this is in consideration of the gender, because that the mainly we are targeting. In conclusion, we are saying that there is need to strengthen Kenya's efforts to integrate gender in clean cooking sector. It's also important, there is importance of gender responsive policies and data for achieving clean cooking transition in Kenya, which we cannot wish away. So we call upon all African countries to commit themselves for continued efforts in improving access, data collection, and again also economic support for women in clean cooking. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for keeping time. Very insightful presentation focusing on a specific sector, the one of clean cooking. All the efforts that the Kenyan government is doing to make sure that it is an inclusive and even a transformative sector with still some needs, especially in terms of data, particularly in rural areas. We would like now to hear from the Ghana experience with Simpson Atieku. Simpson, who is a principal energy economist and analyst at the Energy Commission of Ghana. We are really taking a tour of Africa with different perspectives from different sectors across the continent. Over to you, Simpson. We can see the slides.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be part of today's discussion on the energy and gender data in Africa. I'll be presenting on the integration of gender in biomass statistics, an essential topic that affects millions of households, especially women and girls. Let's start with some key facts about Ghana. Ghana's estimated population in 2024 is about 33 million. Biomass, mainly firewood and charcoal, is a major source of energy, contributing 29.8% of the country's primary energy supply. However, while biomass remains vital for energy access, its usage has significant social, economic, and environmental implications. One of the critical aspects of biomass use is its gendered impact. It affects men separately and women separately. Women are the center of biomass energy consumption, mainly responsible for cooking and collecting fuel. However, they face serious challenges, including health risks, time, poverty, and limited access to alternative or modern forms of energy, which affect their overall well-being and economic empowerment. To develop effective policies that address these challenges, biomass statistics must incorporate gender perspective. Before we explore the gender integration, let's examine the current trends in Ghana. Household reliance on biomass is declining, but it remains significant. It reduced from about 73% in 2010 to about 54% in 2021. Now, let's go to the importance. Now, there's also disparities in the urban, I moved the slide, sorry. Now we have the final energy consumption for biomass also, which is also decreasing, but is still significant. We also have the urban-rural disparities, and in many rural communities, biomass remain primary source of fuel. In most Ghanaian households, their energy choice directly impacts household health, finances, and then the time collection. What are the benefits of using gender into the biomass statistics? Now, when gender is integrated into biomass statistics, it leads to better policies and improved outcomes for communities. It improves health by reducing indoor air pollution, which saves lives and prevents illness, encouraging clean cooking solutions like improved cook stove which benefit the entire households. It also has economic empowerment. When women spend less time collecting firewood, they have more opportunities for education, work, and have access to also modern energy sources, which improves productivity and household savings. Now, if you're able to disaggregate biomass statistics by gender, it will also help us to undertake gender-sensitive interventions. Policies becomes more effective, inclusive, and sustainable. What are some of the strategies? What are some of the strategies that we can use to implement gender disaggregated surveys? We can do that by conducting surveys, and then we need to be intentional where we have to ask gender questions. Access to biomass resources, time spent on biomass-related activities, health risks and impacts, even gender disaggregated data with respect to decision-making participation in households and energy purchases. And we could also develop gender-sensitive indicators, which is important. Some of the indicators in the SDGs are gender neutral, like access to electricity, access to clean energy. We should to have this based on gender as well. Percentage of households headed by women that have access to electricity, that access to clean cooking solutions. Now, about 10 years ago, Ghana started collecting primary data collection nationwide, where we included some level of gender disaggregated questions, but it was elementary, just households that are headed by women, and we didn't collect much data. The board of the commission saw the wisdom in it and has approved a project which will be undertaken this year. And as part of the objectives of the project, we are supposed to collect gender disaggregated data in households, industries, commerce, all the sectors of the economy. We'll be covering questions such as household members involved in the collection of firewood, time spent, average time spent on cooking from household, identifying household clean cooking solutions. Now, when we ask all these gender disaggregated data, it should help us to know exactly the household members who perform cooking tasks per the geographical areas, gender-informed factors, household members involved in decision-making, equitable benefits of household appliance ownership, and appliance ownership, all kinds of appliance ownership, irrespective of the type of fuel they are using. And then the energy use patterns. So in this aspect too, it's not only biomass, but all forms of energy. How will it help us? It will help us analyze who makes decisions and what is the root cause of the use of biomass cook stoves. Maybe the root cause might not be in the energy sector, it might be in the governance sector, or it might be as a result of economic consideration. All these hypotheses, we need to test them. And without having or collecting gender disaggregated data, we cannot do that in a scientific basis. What are the challenges? Despite this novel project that we want to undertake, there are some of the challenges that we have to be careful of, and then bear that in mind. Many surveys do not collect data. So we need to include gender disaggregation, data collection into all forms of data collection, and not only these projects. We also foresee that there's going to be resistance to change. There are some households that might not like even their spouse, who are women, to partake in this crucial data collection. And we need to strategize with that with the help of the Ghana Statistical Service to resolve this. At the same time, we need to involve women in the whole project. So intentionally, we have selected a capable woman to lead the project, who is the project manager for this. Now, what are some of the recommendations? We need to standardize metrics for gender-sensitive data collection. It has to be intentional and it has to be accepted. AU can lead that for all African nations so that we can now have a basis for comparison. We need to build capacity through gender mainstreaming campaigns so that the existing systems that we have, responsibilities will be expanded, and we might not need to employ more people, but just the same people, and then their tasks and scope will be expanded. We also need to invest in programs which promote equitable energy access. The idea of increasing modern form of energy, like a popular target, such as increasing the share of LPG, the share of households using LPG as main cooking fuel, should not just be gender neutral. We have to be intentional about it, and then can develop metrics such as increasing the share of female-headed household from X to Y% to use LPG. We need to encourage female participation in policymaking. There are some things, regardless of the education, unless you understand the person, you might never be able to appreciate and resolve their issues. So we need to intentionally involve female in policymaking. We should not only use competence, though women are very competent, I dare say more than a lot of men, but we need to be intentional. Conclusion: integrating gender into biomass statistics helps to refine policies. It improves health and economic outcome for women and the country in general, and also help in sustaining environmental strides that we've made. And the data, that's the gender disaggregated data, is essential for energy solutions. Let me end by saying that if we empower women, we are not only transforming their lives, but we are transforming generations. And if a generation is about 60 to 70 years, then empowering women today is sustainable for at least half a century. So in the era of scarce resources, this is the best way of using our resources to empower women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simpson, for advocating so strongly for gender-sensitive and even gender-responsive approaches to not only data collection, but also policy making. And it's a good transition to the next presentation, where we are talking about gender, not just for equity, but for economic reasons, like financial considerations. And our next speaker with Rushi Sankrit, manager at Intellicap, is going to help us understand the importance of the data we are talking about in terms of leveraging the resources, the financial resources that we need to go even further.
So, hi everyone, I'm Ruchi. I work with Intellicap. Intellicap is a research consultancy organization that works with enterprises across Asia and Africa. And for today's conversation, I'll be focusing on documenting clean cooking adoption and related impact from the perspective of climate finance and how it can be unlocked for women and girls in Africa. So very briefly, I think I can't overemphasize the significance of clean cooking when it comes to climate actions. Obviously, we understand that adoption and transition to clean cooking has significant impact on emission reduction, black carbon reduction, as well as deforestation. And not just that, climate finance, which is essentially to be used for climate adaptation and mitigation issues, also plays a significant role in accessing or addressing some of the financial gaps when it comes to access to energy. So just for example, it is estimated that by 2030, almost 1 billion people in Africa and sub-Saharan Africa may still have lack of access to clean cooking. And considering that we only have 30% of financing required for transition, climate finance plays a very instrumental role in unlocking and bridging that financial gap. In that context, IDRC and Intellicap has partnered together on this action implementation project, which is essentially focusing on unlocking climate finance. And here our objectives and outcomes are twofold. We are looking to increase the number of businesses in Africa who can, clean cooking businesses that can leverage climate finance. But we're also looking at influencing the investors so that they can adopt better measures on impact measurement on women and girls. And end to end, we hope that our efforts result in more incentives and benefits for women and girls in low-income communities in Africa. And whatever I share today is basis the landscape study that we've undertaken as a part of this project, which was to understand how enterprises in Africa have utilized carbon finance and carbon market projects in their businesses. So we've spoken to a number of enterprises that are active in this sector, either as a distributor or manufacturer of clean cooking products, as well as project developers in the carbon markets. We've also spoken largely to investors and stakeholders in our research study. The publication is not out yet, but whenever it is going to be available and shared publicly. So yeah, what we've noticed, and our research has pointed out, of course, is that there has been a significant, increase in capital access resulting from carbon projects, and this is something that CCA has, Clean Cooking Alliance has demonstrated as well through their survey that in 2022, out of 400 enterprises that they tracked globally, at least 65% of the enterprises were generating carbon credits. So yeah, the significance cannot be sort of over emphasized. And when it comes to carbon projects, data is the bedrock. It is what establishes whether the emission was reduced, whether the carbon offset happened. So especially for project developers, data, transparent data, data that sort of can demonstrate the integrity and credibility of the carbon offset is extremely crucial. It is what enables them to get screened for project by the buyers, as well as in some cases it's also one of driving forces in the pricing aspect. For end users as well, data plays an enabling role, because if a project developer is looking for transparent and credible data, of course, the enterprise has to ensure that the after-sales services, as well as the product that is supplied to end user, is of quality. So in that case, data is also used to ensure that the cook stove or the clean cooking product is maintained, is durable and usable. So while in terms of measurement of carbon emission as well as climate impact, there has been streamlined processes, especially by the standards and methodologies on tracking whether the emission was reduced or not. We see different sort of approaches when it comes to impact measurement. So again, standard bodies like gold standards have sort of set up processes such that project developers can tag their projects on core benefits, and essentially it means in the case of carbon market, it means SDG tagging. So some of the indicators and some of the gender focused indicators were spoken earlier in a couple of the presentations. So enterprises as well as project developers are showcasing how their project have resulted in a reduction in unpaid care work, or health improvements, or employment generation, as well as economic benefits. But what I want to drive forward in this conversation is not just that what kind of indicators are being used currently, but what is the driving force and what the data is enabling for enterprises, for project developers, investors, and end users. So, I would want to, sort of demonstrate some of the use cases of how stakeholders have sort of utilized data in their respective domains. And I'll demonstrate it through 4 use cases. So one is what has come out strongly is how data has also been used by enterprises on empowering communities through carbon revenue. And this could be, of course, in this case of some of the models that we've seen is how enterprises have utilized usage data, adoption data of to incentivize end users. In this case, ATEC is an enterprise based out of Australia, but which has operations in Bangladesh, Cambodia, as well as some of the regions in Africa, where it is using digital technology to monitor how end users are using induction stove, and based on the carbon that is revenue that is generated, ATIC is also dispersing monthly repayments back to end users through digital wallets, in addition to the subsidy that they are providing to end users upfront. So this is a very interesting case where some monthly installments, repayments is being dispersed back to end users using tech and data in place. Yeah. The second sort of use case that we've also seen is how, of course, businesses are using the data for business model improvements, or better distribution and improved product and services. But what we found very interesting is this innovative partnership between BioLite, which is again a assembler distributor of cooking products in Africa, as well as SolarLite, which has done tremendous, very significant work in Africa over the years. So BioLite and Solar Sister have come together to utilize not just a distribution channel where women entrepreneurs can sell and promote the clean cooking products by BioLite, but they are also part of data collection process where they're collecting data and as well as passing it back to BioLite for additional payments. So these entrepreneurs are generating income from sales as well as collection of data. So this is a very interesting model that we saw when it comes in the Carbon project. Again, we've heard very interesting stories about how buyers are increasingly looking at impact data, particularly to gauge value creation in their respective investments or deals that they're buying. And so one thing that has strongly emerged from our consultation with the buyers as well as enterprises is that the very keen interest to understand whether the project is integrating gender responsive measures, whether they're included in stakeholder consultations, or there are policies in place to ensure that there's no harm on communities as well as women, benefits are being shared or not. So these aspects are increasingly being assessed in the due diligence and risk assessment processes adopted by buyers in the clean cooking sector. So yeah, there's a lot of importance of data by buyers as well. Yeah.
Can you move to the full screen mode? Some participants are struggling to read.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank you.
You see it better now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not the great person to, when it comes to technology. So sorry, I was slightly lost. But I hope you can see it now. This is in fact the last two slides. The other innovation use case that we've seen it's when it comes to climate finance innovation. And there was an earlier speaker who spoke about RBF. So we've seen how data again is being used for performance-driven financing, and there's RBFs and outcome-focused instruments that are being designed. There is a very interesting model by IFC Bix Capital and others on climate impact bond, where they came together to monetize gender as well as health co-benefits in designing the RBF, and where Systema Bio basically used biodigesters to create impact in the community, and that were repaid by the outcome funders as well as the financiers through this bond. Yeah, so overall, in terms of recommendations, when it comes to driving impact data as well as those on gender, maybe there are a couple of them have already been spoken by speakers before. I'd like to stress on two of those. One is about the importance of community-based approaches when it comes to data collection and insight generation. So given that, we've seen a very significant role that women leaders and advocates play in communities when it comes to promotion of clean cooking appliances and products, we also see them as to play a very significant role in data collection, management, and insight generation. So they are the ones connected directly to end users and have a very key role to play when it comes to increasing and using the data for increased usage and adoption. So having those community-based models of data collection and insight generation is absolutely crucial and important instead of very centralized mechanisms. The other is how innovative data collection and insight generation can become with the integration of technology, and especially in the case of carbon projects, we've seen enterprises adopting digital technologies and measures to gauge the climate impact and how it can be sort of coupled with measurements on women, especially more insights on what women are doing with the time that is saved from switching to clean cooking, what is the economic benefits, and so forth. So in that, using the technology as well as in digital tech is extremely important, and we're seeing a lot of potential in that. So yeah, that was it from my end, Flobe. I hope I was able to meet your timelines.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Roshi, for an excellent presentation, which complements very well the presentations that we had before by government officials, those who are actively in policy making. So they were taking a public policy perspective at the issue of data availability. In the case of Morocco, it was an holistic view, looking at all what is happening across the entire spectrum. South Africa, we had an interesting case based on a project, drawing some lessons and then moving into action and implementation of some of the recommendations that came out of the study. Then we had Kenya, we had Ghana. What I really like about this presentation that you've just made is that it shows us that there is a real complementarity between what government officials or policymakers are doing from a policymaking perspective and what is now happening from a more private standpoint, especially with businesses and private sector actors. Just to mention that in the chat, there is an invitation for you to reach out to one of the participants who showed a lot of interest in what you were presenting, Innovia Development Foundation. So I'm going to let you take care of that request. On that note, I would now like to invite Bipasha. Bipasha, who is a professor at the University of Western Ontario. She holds a research chair in global women's issues, and she's a member of the College of the Royal Society of Canada. Would like Bipasha to share some expert insights on, not only the issue of data, especially gender-related data in the energy sector, but also some reflection on the presentations that we have had so far. Bipasha, are you in position to share some comments? Okay, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much. And as Flaubert mentioned, I'm at Western University in Canada, and I hold the Canada Research Chair in Global Women's Issues. So this is a topic that I've been working on for a very long time now. I would say that I've been working on both access and employment for about 13 years at this point. And I've looked at both integrating gender equality into small scale and off-grid renewable energy projects. And I've also worked on looking at integrating gender equality into large-scale and grid-connected sort of utility scale projects along the lines of what Elizabeth was speaking about from South Africa. So I don't think I have the time to do too much today. I'm just going to try and do a very brief overview based on what I've heard so far as well from all of the other presenters who went before me. So, next slide.
Next again.
Are you moving?
Well, yes, I'm on the gender.
It looks like you are not moving.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Not moving. Yes. Maybe stop sharing and share again.
Oh, this is very strange. Is it moving now?
It's moving now. But can you go to full screen mode? Can you go to full screen mode?
Sure, yes.
Anyway,
Is it okay now?
No, but
It's very strange because on my end, it's full screen.
yeah, no. Okay, we can proceed.
So I don't think I need to go into detail about the fact that despite the global enthusiasm about clean energy, there are some very, very visible blind spots. And the first one, think about it, is when we think about the Sustainable Development Goals, there's 5 and 7, and those are both gender equality, and 7 is access to affordable energy, and they are both completely mutually reinforcing. I think that's very clear. Move on to the next slide, Flaubert.
Done. No?
I really don't understand what's happening.
No, we are still with slide 2.
Okay,
Yeah, now
thank
it's
you.
3.
Now it's good. Okay.
Okay.
No. Yeah,
Okay.
that's good. Thank you. So one of the big blind spots that I want to point out to in terms of access and employment is that first, we know globally that women have weaker access to new technologies. And this goes back to everything from the Green Revolution in the 70s, electronics in the 1980s, information technologies in the 90s, and also now artificial intelligence in the 21st century. So first, weak access. We also know that 70% of the world's poorest people are women and children, and women are already very underrepresented in energy sector employment. This is also well known. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is just the most recent data in terms of talking about access to clean cooking. And as you can see, this is data from the IEA that was published last year in a report called A Vision for All, which is about clean cooking. As you can see the numbers, and those are the big areas of the world that we need to focus on, one being Africa and the other being Asia. So those are the two, big concerns in terms of the progress made on clean cooking. Next one, thanks. In terms of employment, this is the most recent data for employment this is from the International Renewable Energy Agency. Of course, this captures only formal sector jobs, and we know that there is a lot of employment also generated, for example, in informal biomass in that sector, and one of the presenters, referred to this. So this sector, understanding the informal biomass sector is actually quite challenging because we know that just procuring the data is very challenging, but if we look at agriculture, it gives us kind of a good proxy for also biomass. And now we understand quite well that about 50% or more than 50% of the world's agricultural workforce are women, although they're rarely acknowledged as farmers. So we know that, and that can give us a good guideline about how significant the participation of women would be also in the informal biomass sector. Next slide. So I just want to talk first a little bit about access to opportunities to renewable energy technologies and what the opportunities are. Now, I see each one of these as an opportunity. First, there is an opportunity to design technologies for specific geographic and cultural contexts. And we can think about all kinds of things while doing this: user friendliness, fuel efficiency, if there is a fuel involved, low emissions, portability, durability, service warranties, effects upon household savings, and also some ancillary benefits sometimes, like can you use a cell phone to charge, can you use a clean cook stove to also have cell phone charging capabilities. Now, the next point that's really important, and many have referred to it, the previous presenters, is linking access to energy with livelihood generation. I think this piece is really important. And the presenter just before me, Ruchi, mentioned some of the means by which this can be done. And this is also a great opportunity in terms of access. We can also do community involvement, social awareness about economic health and environmental benefits of renewable energy. Then there is the opportunity to ensure reliable fuel supply if it's a fuel-based technology, and also effective after-sale service for technologies, which can also generate employment or livelihood or income journey, earning potential. We can also connect renewable energy technologies with market forces in terms of private sector organizations, social enterprises in sales, delivery, repair, maintenance, again, all of which also have implications for employment. And we can continue to mentor, train, and provide logistical support for entrepreneurs. Next slide, please. Now, the barriers I think are important to highlight. The first one that I've seen in all my research so far on clean energy technologies, and I include lighting as well as cooking, but cooking is a little bit different, and I'll explain. So the first one is very obvious. It's the outright purchase of these technologies is simply not affordable, especially for many rural poor households. And even the high upfront cost, even if we allow, for example, installment payments, is far too high. So in some cases, the cost of a home solar system in terms of lighting and then also cooking, it added up to about a fifth of the household income, which is obviously far too expensive for rural households to manage. So we need adequate as well as appropriate financing mechanisms. And Ruchi mentioned, for example, the idea of returning cash incentives, which I think is very smart. We need more that kind of smart targeted financing. The biggest piece, though, in terms of barriers, and this one applies more specifically to cook stoves, is the need to understand intra-household gender hierarchies. Because the issue with cook stoves is that often it's not perceived as a family need, it's perceived as a women's need. Now, of course, this is a real problem because everybody consumes cooked food. So it's not a women's need, it's everyone needs clean cooking. And there are other things like water is often called a women's need. Childcare is often called a women's need when very specifically it benefits everyone and society as a whole. So I think changing that narrative is very important in thinking about, especially about cook stoves. I've worked in contexts where we've gone into households where we see that in the living room, they have, a radio, TV, DVD player, a cell phone. And then you notice that the three-stone stove is still being used in the kitchen. So you have sort of the living room in the 21st century and then the kitchen still in the 18th century. Now, often this isn't a function of just poverty. So there's an understanding otherwise that if we reduce poverty, then more people will acquire these technologies. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. And that has to do with intra-household decision-making. So in many households, in most households actually, the man has more purchasing power and can make more decisions about household spending. And often it's not because they're not trying to be good to their family or that they don't appreciate their wives. It's because they don't understand it as a household need. So much so that even if we ask women, how important do you think having a cook stove is, a clean cook stove? They often say no, especially because there are limited resources and they're thinking about what other unmet needs the household has. So they might say, we need everything from a new roof, we need children's education, all kinds of requirements before they're going to talk about the clean cook stove. This isn't because they don't understand the effects, the health effects. They do, but it's seen as something you just have to tolerate. We've always cooked this way, so we can continue to do so. Instead, we'd rather prefer to spend it on other household needs, that rank higher than the clean cook stoves. And I've seen this in many contexts, and I think this is really important to understand and to address. So how we go about understanding this and how we go about addressing it is very important, and that is understanding intra-household gender hierarchies. Next slide, please. Right, I think I've already shown the number of jobs, so we can move ahead with the next slide. Thank you. So in terms of employment in renewable energy projects, women can benefit, of course, from both direct, indirect, and induced employment. So some examples of direct employment that I've seen, some of them will seem obvious: manufacturing, construction, installation, fuel, crop farming and processing, operations and maintenance, sales, repair, marketing. But there is also very interesting things like raising awareness about the need for clean cooking. So doing the education and the awareness raising, especially because in many communities today, they still don't have access to television, for example, right? So the use of other mechanisms, so hiring people to raise awareness, that itself can be a livelihood generating aspect. And then, of course, there are the higher levels of technology, engineering, and technology, design, management, which I don't think I'll have time to get to today, but I appreciate that Elizabeth had shared some data from South Africa. And there's definitely a lot that can be done at that end as well, but I'm not sure I'll get to it today. So in terms of indicators as well, I think everything's been spoken about so far. I'll just mention one. If you look at the last indicator, it says the amount of time spent by women on leisure activities before and after access to clean cooking or sometimes to solar, lighting systems as well. I think this is really important because what we find is that when the workday is elongated, so say you have better access to lighting throughout the day and night, or you have a cook stove, so you can now cook faster and it's not as labor intensive to prepare food for the family. What we find is that women will always just use that time for another kind of productive activity, right? So they're trying to do something for their household, doing something to generate income. And that's desirable, but in some cases we found it actually really useful to ask, are you using this time also to look after yourself, basically, right? In terms of self-care. And that's really important because otherwise we find that when lighting, for example, becomes obvious, becomes available throughout the night, we see that a lot of men are doing things that are clearly, like they're watching television, they're playing a guitar, but for women, we see that they just continue with their workday. So I think this is also important to understand. Next one. In this one, in terms of indicators for monitoring gender equality, I think they're all fairly straightforward, that we don't just look at the lowest levels of employment, we look at employment all the way up, along the top of the hierarchy as well in terms of employment in the energy sector. I want to be able to say a bit more about data, so let's move on to the next slide. I think one of the things that from listening to all the presentations, the availability of gender disaggregated data on energy access and employment is actually weak everywhere in the world. So it's not just something that is an African problem or an Asian problem. As an example, in Canada, we do have gender disaggregated data, but Statistics Canada, which is the federal statistics agency, they collect data on energy and mining together. So we can't even disaggregate energy from mining. So it's very difficult to tell, the specific number of jobs in these sectors, although we do have disaggregated data. So these challenges exist everywhere in the world. And as we know very well, without data, there is going to be no visibility. And without visibility, there's not going to be any policy priority. I remember one of the surveys that I worked on, we gave people the chance to ask, to give us responses, like written responses as well. And one of the questions was, why doesn't equity get enough attention? And somebody wrote, if you don't even know you have a problem, you're certainly not going to fix it, right? So that is a really big piece that why we need data is that people often don't know that this is a problem. Next slide, please. So one of the things I really want to talk about is that I know that several presenters have mentioned the lack of data, right? So we don't have enough gender disaggregated data. We don't have enough data to begin with, and that prevents us from making decisions. I don't entirely find it to be true because for some things, for example, the health effects of cooking indoors with indoor smoke inhalation, that data has actually been available from the World Health Organization, for example, going all the way to the 1960s and 70s. And as you can see, in some context-specific data is important, but it's not as if the health effects of smoke inhalation are going to be different in Tanzania than they are in India. Right. So we do have data and we know that it's very harmful, and that we know the levels of mortality as well. So sometimes I feel that we're using, it becomes a bit of a red herring to say we don't have enough data, we need more data. The same applies for employment. Often, especially in the private sector, the understanding is show us that it's good for business, show us that gender diversity is good for business. And again, that data exists on a global scale, and we know that it's good for business already. What I think is more important is understanding other pieces of this puzzle that can better inform policymaking. The other thing I find is that there's really no data utopia. Like, you're never going to find perfect data to make decisions. I think data has to be convincing enough to inform decision making. And sometimes, instead of reinventing the wheel and finding out how harmful is smoke inhalation, I think we need to address pieces on which we don't really have good data, and that would help us significantly. And sometimes it's a matter of political willingness. I don't think it's the lack of data. I think it's just converting that into political willingness to do things. And so all of those things are important to consider. Now, when we look at data, what kinds of data do we need to understand what the challenges are, what the barriers are? It's very clear, and somebody else mentioned it, I think it was Ruchi, that you need both qualitative as well as quantitative data. We need both. It's not one or the other. We need both because we need to understand the extent of certain problems, but we also need to understand in a very nuanced and detailed way what the issues themselves are, and qualitative data can be better for that. So there's, of course, things like demographic surveys can be done to understand what the needs are. But alongside that, I find, for example, focus groups are very useful. Interviews, both structured as well as semi-structured, and sometimes completely unstructured, can also be very helpful. So some of the things I'm telling you right now, for example, the issue of intra-household inequalities, frankly, if we hadn't done the focus groups and the interviews, that data would not have, those insights would probably not have emerged in the detail that they did. The other thing was, what kinds of employment can be generated from having access to, solar lighting, for example? Again, we found so much detail and things that we couldn't possibly have thought of as ways of generating livelihoods. So in one example, there was a young woman who was actually using it to run a tutoring center in her home. She already had high school and was using it to train young children. So we hadn't even thought of possibilities like that, and that was very important. I agree with Ruchi as well that participant-driven research, community research is very important. So for example, things like using photo voice, which is a research method that uses photography to help people document what their own needs and priorities are, can be a very helpful tool. I'll talk a little bit about willingness to pay surveys next. Everybody knows what a time use survey is, and time use data can, of course, be very helpful, again, for understanding what the effects of having to collect firewood, for example, is having upon a household's expenses, as well as the inability often of women to, take up employment, or for children to go to school. So that's very helpful. The other source of data can be a national census. I have seen countries where the simple question of how are you cooking? What is your basically cooking source of energy can provide very important insights if that question can be incorporated into a national census. So the point being, we need different kinds of data at many different levels to really be able to understand what the barriers are and what the possible solutions are. So I mentioned the willingness to pay survey. This is a project I was involved in a very long time ago, and it was in India, and it was in urban slum communities, basically, trying to understand the ability to pay for legal electricity services. And it was a willingness to pay survey that provided very clear results. So we asked people, we had certain amounts for a connection fee, for the monthly installment, then for the electricity bill, and we looked at, this is the monthly total. What can you afford? And we got very clear guidelines about what people can afford in terms of, for their monthly energy costs. And this is very helpful because then we also have the opportunity to understand what people who don't have access, what we can do for them, right? It enables much more kind of fine-tuned ability to understand problems and to provide responses. Now, I also am a big fan of knowledge synthesis of secondary data. And I say this because, we're never gonna find perfect data anywhere. We're also never going to be able to use, all the data that's in the world. So we have to have some parameters when we collect data for knowledge synthesis of secondary data. So what I mean by that is, of course, there is peer-reviewed scientific literature, and that is considered the golden standard for data, right? That you use peer-reviewed scientific literature. unfortunately, there isn't enough data in all different contexts. So we can't do research on this topic if we don't also look at practitioner literature. So this can come from organizations like IRENA, it can come from the International Energy Agency, it can come from organizations like Energia, which is now called HIVOS, People Unlimited. So the synthesis piece is really important. And then there are gender databases and portals that can also provide helpful data. For example, the World Bank's gender data portal, they have a business and law index, there's the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report. These are all good sources of data. They're not perfect in and of themselves, but if we synthesize them in an organized fashion, in a systematic fashion, they can provide very useful insights into barriers for energy access and opportunities. And finally, actually, the UN Human Development Index, which I'm sure we all know, the HDI, but now there's a newer index called the Multidimensional Poverty Index, in which, in terms of understanding poverty, they use a more complex measure, not just looking at, how many households below the poverty line or how many households living on, $1.90 a day. They use health, education, and also standard of living. And within standard of living, there are two very clear, two of the clear indicators. One is cooking fuel, and the other is electricity. So this is good national data. You can understand, you can get a pretty decent sense of, what the status is for different countries to make comparisons on a national stage. Although, of course, we need all the other data that I've talked about as well. Next slide, thanks. So basically, from this is looking at 111 countries and looking at this multidimensional poverty index, we get a much larger number of people who are considered poor, 1.2 billion people, rather than if we only use income. It's probably half of that. They'll tell you that 600 million people in the world count as poor, but that's simply not a viable measure. I think this is a much better indicator. And from that, we can look at things and we can tell very, very, very useful things like that half of that population are below the age of 18. Very important to know that they're children, essentially. And then we can also get a sense of numbers. So we know that the biggest number of people, multidimensionally poor are in sub-Saharan Africa, and the next one is South Asia. Again, it's very helpful for looking at parts of the world where we need to focus the most, especially if we're talking about these issues on a global scale. Next slide. I really want to say a bit more about standards of evidence, but I mentioned before that knowledge synthesis can be very, very helpful in terms of understanding the world. We can use practitioner literature. There's nothing wrong with using literature produced by, different organizations. So that's very viable information. But at least today, what's happened is that we have scientific peer-reviewed literature, but we also have all other kinds of media diffusion, right? So we have things like blogs that people are putting out. Sometimes there are also crossover sources. There's academic literature, and then academic research that is being published in a public format, which is fantastic because that probably relies on very strong evidence and research. Unfortunately, it's very difficult often to distinguish which one should we use, which is good data, and which is probably just speculation or anecdotal data, right? So that kind of becomes a big challenge. But there are good standards of evidence that can be used for research. So looking for things like adequate documentation, how much detail are they sharing about what they're trying to collect data on? Looking at internal validity, because sometimes you see things in a blog and you'll think, even the data they're sharing isn't even internally, basically valid. So that's obviously a red flag. There's analytical precision. What exactly are they studying and what exactly are they telling us? There's the idea of generalizability. Is the data good enough that we can now use it in a broader context in terms of external validity? So those are all important things. And generally from overall fit, you read a study and you say, is the study designed well enough so we understand that what they found, fits very well with what they went to look for. And the data doesn't matter. It can be quantitative or qualitative data. And finally, what are the warrants for claims? What kinds of claims are they making? And do we have reason to believe that they are real and that we can trust this data? So this is a system that we use for understanding things. And I think it can be very, very valuable. So those are some basic ideas about research and the types of data we need, and also the types of data data that I think we do already have. I think the bigger issue is how to now do the next piece, how to make these technologies affordable in a way that people can actually pay for them, how to perhaps subsidize them in certain ways, and also understanding the dynamics of the intra-household inequality, because I think that piece is really important. And certainly in that piece, it can help when women have their own income, when they're employed, but it's still not sufficient sometimes because women themselves are not articulating often the need for a cook stove because they don't think it's high enough on the list of priorities, especially for poor families, right? So I think that piece is very, very important to understand. Otherwise, I have to say, when I look at the data from broadly from sub-Saharan African countries, some things are fantastic. You see things that really impress you. So I looked at this. I was actually part of I worked on it. It was an IFC, the International Finance Corporation study looking at renewable energy private sector companies in sub-Saharan Africa, and there were 64 organizations that responded. So it was a very fairly comprehensive data set. I can share the source if you want to look at it. One of the most interesting findings from that survey was that in comparison to other sectors and outside of Africa, there were actually more women on the boards of renewable energy companies in Africa. It was 27% compared to G20 countries where it was only 20%. So, in that sense, I think that Africa is really full of contradictions. So we see some trends that are very encouraging. The other one that I found interesting was looking at CEOs. How many women CEOs in publicly traded companies? When we looked at sub-Saharan Africa, we looked at renewable energy companies, and we found that 30% were women of renewable energy private sector companies, which is astonishing because when we look at G20 countries, not just energy, but overall, that number is 3.5%, which is dismal, right? So there are a lot of counterintuitive things in the data set as well. And I'm sure I've run out of time. So I think I'll just end right there and leave a bit of time for conversation. That's fine. You can read it later. It basically just says that there's potential. Renewable energy is not just about transitioning to a new source. It can also change the power dynamics of the world because controlling the flow, the supply, and the prices of fossil fuels gives a few countries in the world immense power. We know this. And a global transition to clean energy can also change these power dynamics because unlike oil and gas, one or a few countries can control the sun, you can control wind, you can control waves. So in that sense, I think there's a very good reason why when people say energy, they also sometimes say power, where power is actually a synonym for energy. And that's because renewable energy, if taken up globally, can also reframe sort of the geopolitics of the current world and make for a more equitable and just world, not just for women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bipasha, for this excellent presentation. And I even want to say summary of the presentations that we had before. On that note, we are coming to the Q&A sections. There are many questions that were raised in the chat for some panelists or for some others. I can see a question from Fatma Teni asking, how can we finance Africa for comprehensive sustainable development in 2025? Not sure to whom that question can go. I also see a question from Nixon. That question was about the South African presentation. The question is, did the study quantify the percentage of engineering jobs relative to all job opportunities in the renewable energy industry? What is the gender representation of female in the other disciplines? I'm just going to read, and then I will go back to the speakers for them to pick one or two that they can address. I think I saw another question at some point to AFREC. So this question from Elizabeth. She said, it is exciting and inspirational that AFREC has already developed series of key indicators on gender and energy data, and that several African national energy ministries are already collecting gender data. So the question is, how are you working with national statistics offices to achieve this? I guess that's for Samson. Another question from Nixon. For the South African case, is the 36% women representation the same across public and private sectors? Are there any differences between public and private? Am I missing anything? Oba UB asked a question about Cameroon, but I don't think that anyone here worked or is working on Cameroon. There was another question still on Cameroon. Then we have, no, that's more of a comment from Elizabeth. I can see another question from Elizabeth. It's kind of long, so let me see. Please give us your views on the most important 1 or 2 national gender and energy indicators that should be added to SDG 7 in a post-2030 framework. Wow. Maybe I should stop there so that our panelists can respond to some of these questions. Although I see one here from Abraham in French. According to the South African presentation, there are more women graduate than employed women graduate. Is the issue about social norms regarding access to employment or working conditions? On Kenya, Kenya had to kind of promote clean cooking businesses by women. So the question is, how can this development or such support or promotion, how was that done? How did Kenya go about achieving that? So it's more about sharing the experience, the Kenyan experience. How did you go about promoting clean cooking businesses? So the floor is to whoever wants to take it among our speakers. I don't know if Samson, how you're working with national statistics agencies?
Okay, thank you very much, Flaubert. I think the question from Elizabeth is very relevant. So for AFREC, I think we work most of the time. We work with with Minister of Energy, because energy statistics most of the time is handled by the Minister of Energy or Energy Commission. It depends on the country, because some country has some dedicated institution for energy commission, like the case of Nigeria and Ghana. So we work either with Ministry of Energy or Energy Commission. So, but that not stop us to work sometimes with National Bureau of Statistics when there are some indicator that the Ministry of Energy are not in a position to produce those indicators. We extend our invitation to the National Bureau of Statistics so that they can assist us to get those indicators. Sometimes when we talk about the clean cooking, because clean cooking indicator most of the time fell under health statistics. And then health statistics, we have every 5 years in most of African countries, one survey we call demographic and health survey. So those kind of indicator now, for example, if we are not able to find with Ministry of Energy, you can easily find with the National Bureau of Statistics. So I think at AFREC, we work most of the time with Ministry of Energy, but that not stop us to work with the National Bureau of Statistics. And then at the national level also, we always encourage a country to have how did you call it, a national commission for energy, sorry, national working group on energy, so that it involve the Minister of Energy, the National Bureau of Statistics, and then also the main stakeholder, so that they can discuss always about energy data issue. So I think what I can if I want to conclude, I can say that we work very well with with National Bureau of Statistics, but our first entry point at the country is the Minister of Energy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samson. Unfortunately, Elizabeth had to go because she has another meeting, so she can't provide answers to the questions that were raised about the South African presentation. But I can see that Stephen would like to come in for the Kenyan case. Yes, Stephen, the floor is yours.
I was almost dropping out, but now because I had other engagements, so I can also be able to come in. On the question on our experience, how we have been able to promote women in clean cooking. As I mentioned, there is a lot of capacity building on this area. One, we give them the skills on how to prepare those clean cooking devices at the local level, so they can be able to make the clean cooking solutions and market them in the rural areas. And in the case of our project, which we are doing with the World Bank, we have introduced we have introduced the end user subsidy, but majorly, one of the best things that we have done is actually build the capacity of the women to be able to build these clean cooking solutions and market them. We do it as women groups, and from the women groups, they can be able now to prepare these clean cooking solutions and market them. And they also now can be able to do it at the homestead where they get demand. So this has really helped us to be able to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen.
And I beg to drop from because of other engagement. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much for your time and for your interest. We have 3 minutes left. I don't know if any other speaker would like to come in and reflect on some of the questions. Bipasha, you are on mute.
I really love, I'm looking at Elizabeth's question where she's saying 1 or 2 indicators, they do the Gender and Energy Compact and the custodian organizations produce this data. We know that, and they're working on 1 or 2 gender and energy indicators to be prepared with evidence to advocate for the important milestone, like the 2025 review. Yeah, I like the question, but I'm not sure. My big challenge is that the indicator has to mean the same thing in everywhere, right? So finding one that is a good measure is challenging. Yeah, I like the question, but we'll have to think more about that.
Thank you so much, Bipasha. I don't think that there was any question for Rushi, so maybe we can just yes, Bipasha.
Is Elizabeth still here, or she's left?
No, she had to leave.
Okay, I had a question just about for her, but I can reach out to her. It's fine.
Okay, sounds good. We are coming to an end to this webinar. Maybe with Samson, we can say a few words. Unless, yes, Bipasha, you wanted to come in?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Samson, maybe I can go back to you for some closing remarks and like next steps, way forward, kind of. Or I can go first. I mean, from IDRC's perspective, this is definitely a very insightful experience the first time that we are collaborating, that we are partnering to organize a webinar. And we can see that going by the number of registrations, there is a lot of interest. And what it tells us is that the demand for evidence, demand for knowledge on this issue of energy and, let's say, development more generally in Africa, there is a lot of demand. There's definitely a role there for AFREC and IDRC to inform ongoing conversations, be it at the policy level or in the business community, making sure that decisions are evidence-based and working with the relevant stakeholders to meet the demand for evidence and data. And of course, it is through such activities that we can get a sense of what exactly are those needs, what exactly are those data and evidence demands. So with Samsung and AFREC, we'll keep consulting, reaching out, and then planning accordingly for even more conversations and discussions. Samson, would you like to come in?
Yeah, sorry, I was facing some challenge. I don't know with my laptop, so I was about to disconnect and come again. So I say thank you very much. I think it was a very good webinar, and then we discussed a lot. I think I was happy to hear that people they already discussion already about POSO 2030. This is my first time I hear that thing. I thought we were still making a progress. How far a country, how they can achieve a goal of 2030. But now I saw a discussion from Elizabeth, they already talk about the post 2030. So I think it's good that we continue with collaboration. We are always available, especially when it comes to energy statistics or energy information system, to share the best experience from a country so that country can learn from each other, and then also bring the academician like a Professor Bipasha into a discussion so that they can show the outcome of the research so that the policymaker can use. So I think from the end of AFREC, we are always available to collaborate with any partner. I think this is our collaboration with ERDC, and then I think it was very good. So we hope that starting from this webinar now, we'll be able to conduct other webinar so that you can share or you can bring your researcher on board, and then they can present the outcome of the research, and then also learn from government side what the government are saying in terms of energy statistics, energy information system. Today we discussed about the gender, but I'm not sure that we finish the discussion. There are still a lot of ongoing discussion that we can have on gender and then energy data. We can continue discussion and then see if, because today the discussion was general, we can now targeting one sector. For example, I know Professor Bipasha was talking about oil and gas. In Africa here, we have some section in charge of oil and gas. So we can see now how women are involved on oil and gas sector. And then this can be a topic for maybe another webinar. We can brainstorm with discussion later and see how we can bring this thing on board. Okay, so having said that, I think on behalf of Executive Director of AFREC, Mr. Rashid Ali Abdallah, I would like to thank you very much, Flaubert, for the good collaboration between your organization and the AFREC. We are always available to work closely to make sure that the academician and then the government, they talk to each other, and then also to share also the best experience. So I would also thank also Professor Bipasha for her support since the organization of this webinar, the preparation until this organization of this webinar today. This is the first webinar that we organize together. I'm sure 100% that will not be last. So we continue with brainstorming offline and see maybe in next 1 month or next 2 months if we can bring another topic on board again and then have another webinar. Thank you very much, and then back to you, Flaubert.
Thank you so much, Samson. I'm just going to thank the participants and the speakers for not only their time, but also their interest, and really looking forward to having another webinar soon, and also reassuring everybody that the presentations will be made available. We actually promise we'll do that. On that note, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your interest, and please, let's keep the momentum. Let's not drop the ball. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.